Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight I'm continuing my review of The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show at the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. There are many ways to support the show. You can share the show with others and rate and review it on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also sign up for the Patreon feed and get all the extra content there for as little as $1 per month. And you can check out the merchandise store and get all kinds of shirts and other items there with designs made by friends of the show. Also, please follow Jen, the Arcane Observer, who has her own channel, and when she is able, she joins me on the show on Saturdays, and Michael Strange of Trouble Minds Radio and the Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where you can hear all kinds of amazing shows as well as my own online for free 24/7. And a few things uh, to to make sure everyone knows here before I start reading here again. The words and thoughts of Charles Fort uh, may not uh, may not be your own or my own. We may not agree with him, but that's okay, and that's how it goes sometimes. Also, excuse me. If there's anything that he talks about as being mysterious or unexplainable that seem like they have been explained at this point, keep in mind this book is almost 100 years old, or right around there. So a lot has happened since then, obviously. So there may be things that have been figured out since then. And last thing, of course, is words are hard, and so I may mispronounce things um, and names and places. And not all the words in Fort's books are even in English. So I will accidentally say things the wrong way, and I apologize for that in advance. So, but thank you all for listening in, and let me get back to the book here. And we left off. Fort was talking about falls of ice, different sized pieces and shapes of ice, and um, just these random falls of multiple pieces, or in some cases, one massive 10 or 20 pound piece of ice. So continuing on with that theme so far, I'm sure it'll change eventually. Back to the book here. Flammarion, the atmosphere, page 394. That a profound darkness came upon the city of Brussels, June 18th, 1839. There fell flat pieces of ice, an inch long. Intense darkness at Aitkin, Minnesota, April 2nd, 1889. Sand and, in quotation marks, solid chunks of ice, in quotation marks, reported to have fallen. Science, April 19, 1889. In Simmons Meteorological Magazine, 32-172, are outlined rough-edged but smooth-surfaced pieces of ice that fell at Manassas, Virginia, August 10th, 1897. They look as much like the roughly broken fragments of a smooth sheet of ice as ever have roughly broken fragments of a smooth sheet of ice looked. About 2 inches across and 1 inch thick. In Cosmos 3-116, it is said that at Rouen, Rouen, July 5th, 1853, fell irregular shaped pieces of ice about the size of a hand, described as looking as if all had been broken from one enormous block of ice. That, I think, was an aerial iceberg. In the awful density, or almost absolute stupidity, of the 19th century, it never occurred to anybody to look for traces of polar bears or of seals upon these fragments. Of course, seeing what we want to see, having been able to gather these data only because they are in agreement with notions formed in advance, we are not so respectful to our own notions as to a similar impression forced upon an observer who had no theory or acceptance to support. In general, our prejudices see and our prejudices investigate, but this should not be taken as an absolute. And I do like that. He's saying these things are weird to me, basically, but what do I know, in a way? That's what I'm sort of getting from that. Which I think is an important kind of view to have. Just, I think this is what's going on, maybe. Either way, here's what is being reported. Here's what we think we know, and go from there. Which is sort of something I've tried to do with everything I've experienced and everything all the research I do into other experiences. Um, I try not to say definitely or 100% that I know what any of these things are that we talk about or that I've experienced or that people experience. Whether we're talking about naming them or any of those things. So, getting back to the book, Monthly Weather Review, July 1894. That from the Weather Bureau of Portland, Oregon, a tornado of June 3rd, 1894 was reported. Fragments of ice fell from the sky. They averaged 3 to 4 inches square and about an inch thick. In length and breadth, they had the smooth surfaces required by our acceptance. And according to the writer in the review, in quotation marks here, gave the impression of a vast field of ice suspended in the atmosphere and suddenly broken into fragments about the size of the palm of the hand, in quotation marks. This datum, profoundly of what we use to call the damned, or before we could no longer accept judgment or cut and dried condemnation by infants, turtles, and lambs, was copied, but without comment, in the Scientific American 71-371. Our theology is something like this. Of course, we ought to be damned, but we revolt against adjudication by infants, turtles, and lambs. We now come to some remarkable data in a rather difficult department of supergeography. vast fields of aerial ice. There's a lesson to me in the treachery of the imaginable. Most of our opposition is in the clearness with which the conventional but impossible becomes the imaginable, and then the resistant to modifications. After it had become the conventional with me, I conceived clearly of vast sheets of ice a few miles above this earth, then the shining of the sun, and the ice partly melting. That note upon the ice that fell at Derby, water trickling and forming icicles upon the lower surface of the ice sheet. I seemed to look up, and so clearly visualized those icicles hanging like stalactites from a flat-roofed cave in white calcite. I looked up at the underside of an aerial ice lump and seemed to see a papillation similar to that observed by a calf at times. Okay. Huh. But then, he repeats that twice there. If icicles should form upon the underside of a sheet of aerial ice, that would be by the falling of water. An icicle, of course, or is, of course, an expression of gravity or gravitation. You don't use the word gravity. And if water melting from ice should fall toward this earth, why not the ice itself fall before an icicle could have time to form? Of course, in quasi existence, where everything is a paradox, one might argue that the water falls, but the ice does not, because the ice is heavier, that is, in masses. That notion, I think, here we go. That notion, I think, in a more advanced course than we are taking in the present. I'm not sure. Let me make sure I got that right. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread that. That notion, I think, belongs in a more advanced course than we are taking at the moment, or at present. Sorry. It's funny how I just don't see words sometimes. Anyway, um, our expression upon icicles, a vast field of aerial ice. It is inert to this Earth's gravitation, but by universal flux and variation, part of it sags closer to this Earth and is susceptible to gravitation. By cohesion with the main mass, this part does not fall, but water melting from it does fall and forms icicles. Then, by various disturbances, this part sometimes falls in fragments that are protrusive with icicles. Of the ice that fell, some of it enclosing living frogs at Dubuque, Iowa. Probably, if I said that wrong, I apologize. June 16th, 1882. It is said, Monthly Weather Review, June 1882, that there were pieces from 1 to 17 inches in circumference, the largest weighing 1 pound. and icicles half an inch in length. We emphasize that these objects were not hailstones. The only merger is that of knobby hailstones, or of large hailstones with protuberances wrought by crystallization, but that is no merger with terrestrial phenomena, and such formations are unaccountable to orthodoxy. Or it is incredible that hail could so crystallize, not forming by accretion in the fall of a few seconds. For an account of such hailstones, see Nature 61-594. Note the size, in quotation marks, some of them the size of turkeys' eggs, in quotation. It is our expression that sometimes the icicles themselves have fallen, as if by concussion, or as if something had swept against the underside of an aerial ice floe, detaching its papillations. Monthly Weather Review, June 1889. That in Oswego, New York, June 11th, 1889, according to the Turin and New York Leader, there fell, in a thunderstorm, pieces of ice that, in quotation marks, resembled the fragments of icicles, close quotation marks. Monthly Weather Review, 29-506. That on Florence Island in the St. Lawrence River, August 8th, 1901, with ordinary hail, fell pieces of ice, in quotation marks, formed like icicles, the size and shape of lead pencils that had been cut into sections about 3/8 of an inch in length. So, and close quotation marks. So, our data of the Super Sargasso Sea and its Arctic region, and for weeks at a time, an ice field may hang motionless over a part of the surface. The sun has some effect on it, uh, upon it, I'm sorry, but not much until late in the afternoon. I would say. Wow, I can't read tonight. I should say. Part of it has sagged, but is held up by cohesion with the main mass, whereupon we have such an occurrence as would have been a little uncanny to us once upon a time, or fall of water from a cloudless sky, day after day, in one small part of this earth's surface, late in the afternoon, when the sun's rays had time for their effects. Monthly Weather Review, October 1886. That according to the Charlotte Chronicle, October 21st, 1886, for 3 weeks there had been a fall of water from the sky in Charlotte, North Carolina, localized in one particular spot, every afternoon about 3 o'clock. That whether the sky was cloudy or cloudless, the water or rain fell upon a small patch of land between two trees and nowhere else. That's fascinating. This just minute piece of, I don't know what it'd be. The atmosphere is just reacting that one way in that one spot for that one period of time across several days. Anyway, this is the newspaper account, and as such, it seems in the depths of the unchosen, either by me or any other expression of the Salvation Army. The account by the Signal Service Observer at Charlotte, published in the Review, follows, in quotation marks here, an unusual phenomenon was witnessed on the 21st, having been informed that for some weeks prior to date, rain had been falling daily after 3 p.m. on a particular spot near two trees, corner of Ninth and D Streets. I visited the place and saw precipitation in the form of raindrops at 4:47 and 4:55 p.m., while the sun was shining brightly. On the 22nd, I again visited the place, and from 4:05 to 4:25 p.m., a light shower of rain fell from a cloudless sky. Sometimes the precipitation falls over an area of half an acre, but always appears to center at these two trees, and when lightest occurs there only. In quotation marks, and that's the end of that chapter. So that's not even ice. That's just water. And I've heard of just really tiny um, clouds, or just microscopic in the larger scheme of weather and all that. Just um, rain falling in places, and that's a. I've never heard of it that many days in a row like that, which is really odd. It makes me think of paranormal accounts from people who, every so often, and more so in the past, I think, than in modern times. I wonder if that's because of technology, or people think that they have most of the things figured out. But the reports, and they still do happen here and there. Reports of weather just changing suddenly, along with other phenomenon, seeing cryptids, creatures, um, getting a sense that someone is where they're at, they shouldn't be there, and all of a sudden the weather changes. So there is a connection between weather and storms and paranormal experiences. I don't know. I can't say that everything I just described there is connected to what Fort was describing there. I'd be curious if there was any other odd experiences that people had in those areas around those times. Of course, we won't know. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.